Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry, from design companies like Transom that helps wineries tell their story through visual design, to today's guest, Yuan Ji, whose mission is to bring mezcal from small family-owned producers in Oaxaca to an international market. Today's episode, it's sponsored by Barrels Ahead. At Barrels Ahead, we work with you to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and connects you with your ideal customers. In short, if you're a business looking to retain a winery or craft beverage producer as a client, Barrels Ahead will figure out a plan to make it happen. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. Now, before I introduce today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to last week's guest, Josh Jacobs of Speakeasy Co. On last week's show, Josh and I discussed 3 key factors that he has seen that separate the successful craft distilleries from those that continue to struggle. Check out that show to learn how you can level up your operation and realize sustainable, scalable growth. Today, I am super excited to talk with Yuan Ji. Yuan Ji gave up a successful legal career to answer a higher calling. She started Erstwhile Mezcal with her co-founder, Kevin Brown. Now, Erstwhile is a mission-driven company dedicated to partnering with small, independent, family-owned producers of mezcal in Mexico to go global and reach consumers in international markets for the first time. Welcome to the show, Yuan.
Hey, Drew. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for being on. So before we jump into mezcal, I got to know, how did you make the shift, and why did you make the shift from law into mezcal?
Ooh, it's a long story, but when I first started learning about Oaxaca in front of small independent producers, some of which are our partners now, I was practicing law full time in New York. And unlike some people's stereotypes about lawyers in big law, I was actually really passionate about my subject area. I was an antitrust attorney, which involves a lot of economics, working with economists as our experts. And, I was a math and econ double major in undergrad. So antitrust was always just right up my alley for as long as I remember. But just once I gradually made the shift from a clueless consumer and then to mezcal enthusiast and then to evangelist. And it just became increasingly compelling that this vision for what Erstwhile is about is work worth doing. As much so, if not more so, than what I was doing in private practice as an attorney. So that's the long and short of it.
The long story short of it. Now, when you made the jump or decided to make the shift from being an attorney over into alcohol, were you drawn to mezcal specifically, or did you just kind of want to join the spirits industry?
It was specific. It was a very laser focused on mezcal, specifically the small independent producers that who were my portal to the world of mezcal. It was very much about my specific introduction. And then Alvin Starkman, who runs mezcal education tours here in Oaxaca, was my Sherpa. He led this tour, and he's been a Sherpa for many in the industry since then. So shout out to Alvin. That's kudos to him for introducing me and learning mezcal this way. But to answer your question, it wasn't just I had no interest in the spirits industry prior to discovering mezcal. So it was very laser focused on doing something for small producers, specifically mezcal producers, not the wider spirits industry per se.
That's so amazing. It's so pure, because a lot of times people just want to be part of the alcohol industry, and then they figure out that kind of niche that excites them. You kind of circumvented all of that and just got a passion for mezcal. And what about it? What about mezcal that drew you in?
Many things. It's very much a sensory experience. So just thinking back to my first trip to Oaxaca, the distilleries, the family distilleries we visited were very rustic looking. Everything is still very traditional, very rustic. You really feel you feel the fresh air, the cut grass, right? The roasted maguey. You can taste the sweetness of the maguey. And there's the horse pulling the mill, grinding down the maguey. So that experience in totality is really, it's beautiful and compelling, especially in this industrialized age that we live in. And if you're like me, who's lived and grown up in cities all my life, are by default, what we're used to when it comes to food is super, super sterilized and industrialized. So it's that shock, a very pleasant one, but it's that shock and contrast between what we're used to as consumers, what we put in our body, and also just being in an environment where everything still feels natural and timeless. So that's part of what makes mezcal so compelling for me.
That's enough to ignite a lot of passion there. I can definitely see that. Now, so as far as Erstwhile, how did that come about? Was there, tell us about that.
Yeah, so Erstwhile is we're a boutique importer of mezcal and agave spirits in general. It's really a solution. It's a natural solution to a problem that presented itself to me. So in other words, I didn't set out wanting to be a mezcal importer. That's just crazy talk. I mean, I'm practicing law in New York. Why would I want to start an importing company? But it's just that it started with this idea that it wouldn't be great if we do something to support small, independent, family-owned producers. There's so many of them. It's not just one or two families. There's so many of them. They make so many amazing different expressions.
Like roughly how many family-owned producers are there in mezcal?
Oh my gosh, I have no idea. Literally, you can just drive out in the country from Oaxaca, drive into a village and poke your head out of the car and yell mezcal. And then chances are you'll find quite a few families in that village alone. So, I don't have a precise number for you, but I do know just from my travels, my experience largely limited to Oaxaca right now, there is too many small producers who should, it'd be great for them to take advantage of this global trend, this growing global trend of mezcal rising in popularity, not just in the US, other international markets too, so that the growth and the revenue isn't just limited to, large known brands. But wouldn't it be great if just small independent producers can get on the bandwagon and grow their family business too? So that, going back to your question about how Erstwhile started, that was a disconnect in my mind, that the sheer number of small producers who have no representation, not just in New York, they have no representation outside of their home village. I can't find their mezcal in Oaxaca City, let alone back in New York. The problem that presents itself is the disconnect between small producers and consumers like myself, who do want to, support, who want my support to go directly towards small producers, but there's just no way. There's so many obstacles in between on both sides of the border. So that's a long-winded way of saying I didn't set out wanting to start an importing company. It was just that this is the problem in my mind that I want to do something about, and I want to bridge this disconnect. Well, how do I go about it? You just start doing small, minute actions. And the first one, the most natural one I can think of is, well, start an importing company. I mean, how do you bring mezcal in? You become an importer.
So you started so you got the idea. There's an unmet need. This mezcal is not being distributed. So your first step was start the import company, and then you got to find somebody that's willing to.
Exactly.
Were there some challenges in starting that up, or?
Getting the importer license in the US took time. It took a few months, but that's really just the tip of the iceberg. When I think of the challenges and the obstacles, specifically in the US market, getting the import license was a cakewalk. Not exactly, but it was, just a paper application. You fill it out, you wait, eventually you get your license. It took time, but the real barrier to entry is, the real barrier to entry, in my opinion, is the legal system controlling all sales of alcohol in the United States, which is not just mezcal, it's wine and spirits.
Sure. So for Erstwhile, back in the early days, so you've got your import license. How did you go about finding this network of producers that you can partner with?
So it's very organic and word of mouth. As we grow, I would love to make it less random and word of mouth and become like a digitized platform where small producers can just get on and put their mezcal up. But for now, it's still very word of mouth. Our first two partner producers behind our first shipment, our flagship line, were those two families, the Hernandez family, the Garcia families. I had actually met them on my very first trip to Oaxaca in late 2015 through Alvin Starkman at Mezcal Education Tours. So that was that connection. And Alvin had known them for much longer through his time in Oaxaca. So it was a very much a friend of a friend situation. But once as Erstwhile grows, our vision and mission is to not just limit ourselves to the families and the friends that we already know, but to extend the platform, extend the opportunities to as many families as possible. So now we have we just onboarded two new partner producers. So now we have a total of 4 families.
Oh, nice.
And that's why I'm currently in Oaxaca working with the family we already know, the new producer families, trying to get a lot of great video content of their production in process so that we can share that sensory experience with consumers and mezcal lovers all over the world. So yeah, to answer your question, it's word of mouth, but just going forward, it will be word of mouth and hopefully a more formalized way to reach as many small producers as possible.
Sure. And as you partner with these producers, we kind of talked in the pre-show about some of the challenges that they just faced being, in Oaxaca and not being able to reach that international market. How do you facilitate this, and how does that partnership work?
So the way we partner with our producers is that, we have some core values as a company when it comes to how we work with producers. One is starting with autonomy and fair trade. By autonomy, I mean, we don't impose on the producer in any way. We don't say, make it this. We don't say, bring down the alcohol level so that maybe it's more palatable for people who are afraid of high alcohol content. We just say, make mezcal how your family has always made it, how you prefer to make it. If you want to experiment so with other ways, we'll support that. But we don't impose or limit or control the producer's production process in any way, because ultimately that's their expertise. And then fair trade is we pay our producers their asking prices. We don't bargain. We don't ask exclusivity contracts, right? Something to the effect, oh, you can only work with us in XYZ capacity and not with others, because it's just do what's best for your family business. So that's one way. Other kinds of support we provide for our producers is to, there's a lot of license and there's quite a few licenses and permits that you need in order to export out of Mexico. So when it comes to support, we believe in setting up the producers for export for success on their own terms, independent of their work with Erstwhile in the future. They're not beholden to us. But for example, right now, one of our new partner producer families, they're an 8th-generation producer, and they have a local brand. But guess what? They're not listed in the registry of exporters in Mexico. That's one of the permits that you need, right? So we talk about this like, well, in my mind, you're interested in export, you want interest in global markets. A necessary step is to become an exporter and have that paperwork ready to go in your own name. So that's an example. So we front the legal, the application cost, the expenses of working with lawyers, notaries, accountants, whatever that legal support is necessary at a local level to get them set up. Those are some of the examples in which we support and partner with our producers here.
That's fantastic. Like really setting them up for success in exporting, even beyond like, should they move on past Erstwhile or passed on, you've given them those skills and that kind of a baseline to grow.
Absolutely. That's something we're proud of and we feel good about.
That you should. That's fantastic. As far as the production level, like some of these family-owned producers, what are we talking about as far as the amount of bottles they produce a year, and then the amount you're importing?
So it's very it depends on each no two producers are the same. It's our current partner producers, it's very much in response to demand, right? So if I say to our producers, okay, let's reserve 1,000 liters, a couple thousand liters, then they'll source the agave and start the production process, and then let me know when it's ready so we can get it bottled. But the point I'm making is that currently they have enough steady work and demand for their mezcal that they are making mezcal nonstop full time. I would like to see it that way. I would like to see mezcal being a bigger chunk of their revenue. But there's the producers we work with are often, they have farmers, right? They have crops. So they may be tending to their land, to their crop when production is not in process. So it's diversified in that way. But what I can do through Erstwhile is as we grow as a company, I hope to see mezcal as a bigger and bigger chunk of reliable, predictable revenue for our partner producer families.
Okay, so mezcal may be just one of the things that they're producing on the farm.
Exactly.
And as it becomes a bigger revenue source, then they may be able to devote more
they will
time.
shift their attention and energy toward mezcal production. But at this point, Erstwhile is still a young company. I would like to think that a few years down the road that we're big enough a company that we've have enough fans and believers in what we're doing, our business model, that there's enough organic consumer demand to just provide a steady, nonstop revenue in the form of mezcal orders for our partner producer families. That's my dream. We're not quite there yet, but I'm working on it.
But you're helping them remain independent and remain like family-owned producers. Like Absolutely. In the alcohol space, you see there's two forces going on. You got consolidation of just you see that a lot in tequila, where you've got just large corporations that are trying to mimic the family-owned. And then you have in the United States, the whole craft distillery industry popping up, where the smaller, the better, the more unique it is. And you're preserving that kind of family-owned. Aside from Erstwhile, how is the landscape of mezcal in Oaxaca? Do you see some consolidation taking place, or do you see just it remaining family-owned?
That's a really good question. So, I don't pretend that I have a bird's eye view, omniscient, macroscopic view of the entire mezcal industry. I'm actually, if anything, very much on the ground. I'm super hands-on, and my energy is really laser focused on our partner producers. So mezcal is becoming more popular, and I definitely hear stories of consolidation and companies and partnering with local producers. So it's almost too complicated and too wide of a topic for me to dive into, because there's pros and cons, right? So just there are discussions about Mexican-owned and non-Mexican-owned brands, for example, as a kind of a litmus test for what brands you should support. And in my mind, for example, that misses the point, because Mexican-owned or non-Mexican-owned brands is not really, I think, the most useful question to ask, because even if it's foreign-owned, celebrity-owned, there's definitely, you have to think about it's bringing jobs, it's bringing reliable employment. Right? It doesn't mean that they're treating their partner producers badly or abusing them in some way. So I think I think that conversation goes both ways. The onus is not just on the brand owner of, you have to do more, you have to be more transparent and show more. It's like, yes, this is speaking from a consumer and as a brand owner now, right, in the industry. So I think the onus is also on consumers to not jump to conclusions, to be thoughtful, to dig beyond the surface. So, to answer your question, it's almost too big of a topic for for me to comment on, but I can speak about our partner producers and each family and what they're doing.
I want to talk about that. But you brought up a great point. Whether it's Mexican or not is not really the topic of concern, because it could be a Mexican-owned conglomerate that really just takes away all the autonomy from the small family-owned producers.
It can be there's certain contingents in our industry that like to hate on celebrity-owned brands. Mm-hmm. Those hombres in Mezcal and Kendall Jenner's 818 tequila are the two most recent examples that I can think of. And then that in my mind, obviously, it's just that the fact that it's celebrity owned or not Mexican owned, it kind of misses the point. If you really care about supporting producers' livelihood and well-being, you kind of have to dig deeper.
Yeah.
Because the things you're concerned about can happen, whether it's Mexican or non-Mexican owned. It could be Mexican celebrities, it could be Mexican conglomerates, no?
Absolutely. So talking about the authenticity of your producers, tell me about them.
So we have 4 producer families now. I can start with the earliest ones because I've known them the longest. One is the Hernandez family. The late Juan Hernandez Mendez unfortunately passed away last September during the pandemic. So this is a new stage for this family. They're a 5th generation producer in Santiago Matalan, Oaxaca. But this is their local distillery, Palenque brand is called Desde la Eternidad, since eternity. But this is a new chapter for the family because now it's all women. It's all women owned, women operated.
Wow.
Women, they're very hands-on. So it's Hortensia, that's Juan's wife, and then 2 of her daughters, Lydia and Nayeli, so that are at the head of the family now. So it's not, it's very uncommon to have not just women-owned in name, but truly women-owned, women-operated, overseeing the production, touching everything. That's a new chapter for this family. Our other inaugural flagship partner producer is Silvio Garcia and his wife Epifania Gomez. They're still based in the same municipality in Santiago Matalan, but you just have to drive another 20, 30 minutes on the highway. I just saw him this morning to just continuing taking video content of this production that's in process. But he's a 3rd generation producer. They're both families actually are Zapotec heritage, which is one of the indigenous ethnic groups represented here in Oaxaca. So, Silverio's parents don't speak Spanish for the most part. They speak Zapoteco.
Oh, wow.
And Silverio speaks Spanish, obviously. He's, in his late 30s and young family, and they just had a baby girl. So just like growing and everyone's fine. Everyone in that family is fine during survived, made it through the pandemic. Thank God. But yeah, those are just.
How did the styles different between those two?
So there's similarities or differences. Ultimately, each family has its own, hand of the maker, unique styles. So I'll start with what they have in common. Both producers use copper pot. That's typical, traditional for Santiago Matalan. When you go to other villages, other regions, the traditions are different. For example, one of our new, more recent partner producers, Abel Quiroz, uses clay pots for distilling. That's ancestral mezcal. But leaving that aside for a moment, I'm going to come back to these 2 families, the Hernandez and the Garcias. What they have in common is that they use copper pots, and it's double distillation. I'm collaborating on a special Pechuga mezcal with the Hernandez women mezcaleras right now. That's triple distillation because Pechuga oftentimes involves additional distillation. Now, what they have difference, there are many. The taste is very different. I would say for the Hernandez family, their preferred alcohol level is a bit lower than the Garcias. Their mezcal are almost around 44-45%. That's just that family's personal preference. Which reminds me of, a certain contingent in the mezcal industry that like to stop at mezcal, below, I don't know, below 45% ABV is not real mezcal. For this contingent, I was like, just calm down, just relax. The family is right on the border, but it's legit mezcal. Anyway, I digress. For the Garcias, their mezcal, I think by default, their preference is around 49%, even 50%, even more. So the Erstwhile Espadin is from the Garcias family. And what's really exciting now is that they are experimenting with more ancestral styles now. So they're using there's some, videos on our social media, Instagram, trying to capture what's going on. So instead of copper pot, they're replacing the copper with a clay pot, the top part of the still, the part where it captures the steam.
Wow.
And the turbante, the long tube that's transferring the mezcal vapor steam to the cooling process. Typically, that's copper, and that's as the Erstwhile Espadin is all copper. But our new releases coming, I guess fall 2021, is Silverio Garcia going rogue, going ancestral, and instead of copper tube, he is using a quiote, which is the stalk of the agave plant. When it flowers, there's a stalk that shoots out from, and it's hollow inside, and it's hard like a small tree trunk.
Yeah.
So he took this long quiote, which is 20, 30 feet, and he's using that as the pipe now instead of copper.
To me, how does the flavor profile differ once you go to ancestral?
I think with ancestral, in my experience, just thinking about Silverio's ancestral versus artisanal copper distilling, both are super flavorful. There's already a lot of mineral earthy notes and layers kind of resonating earth, smoke, vanilla in his copper, the original copper mezcal. But now that I have samples of him doing ancestral mezcal, I would say those notes are amplified, like extra earthy, extra I have some right here. I think the earthy mineral notes are amplified even more.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. So you've got your producers, you've got these new and stressful ones sound fantastic. Are these going to be in tandem with the regular copper distill? Like you've got the copper distill version, then you got the clay distilled, or is this just the new version of their mezcal?
So I guess that I should speak about just what you can expect from Erstwhile expression wise and mezcal release timing wise. So the Erstwhile model is to focus on limited edition. Everything by default is limited edition. There's very small batches. For our first shipment, a typical batch is a few hundred liters, so a few hundred bottles per expression, right? So the idea is that this is delicious. We want to share this with as many consumers and enthusiasts as possible. Enjoy it while you can, because there's no guarantee that it'll come back. And that most of our mezcal expressions are also wild agave varietals that take much longer than Espadin to mature to be available on the market. So it's not a widget, a commodity, in the sense that we can bring any of this back at a moment's notice. They don't grow on trees, so to speak. If this Tepestate, which takes typically 25, 30 years ballpark to mature, if there's no Tepestate available on the market, we can't make mezcal from Tepestate. It's just there's no agave available, right? So basically for everything else besides Espadin, there are constraints, including the availability of agave, and obviously sustainability concerns that you don't want to proactively drive any wild agaves to extinction. But going back to your question about how do these releases roll out, we'll always have Espadin. It's a farmed agave. There's no sustainability concerns. We'll probably always have Silverio Garcia's copper pot Espadin available. It's just because It's delicious.
Yeah.
People love it. There's proven consumer demand for it. Why get rid of a good thing? Besides espadín, everything else we bring in is by default tiny batches of a few hundred bottles, limited editions. Enjoy it while you can, and our next shipment will be something completely different. So if you like our palette, you don't have to love everything. But if you like at least one mezcal that we took all this trouble to bring to you, dear end user consumer, hope you keep an eye out and give our new mezcal releases a chance. That's kind of the Erstwhile model.
Oh yeah, and you can also just see all the diversity in the product, and
absolutely
really just speaks to the land and the agriculture down there.
Right, and that's part of the thing. One of our core values, mezcal education. As a company, right, independent of sales, independent of you buy a bottle or 100 bottles or no bottles at all. It's just that if we can share something new about mezcal and with a new person and have them walk away understanding a little better what's all this rage about mezcal, why it's so popular, then we've done something. We've added some value for society at large, independent of sales. And part of education is to showcase the diversity of mezcal. So that affects our business model, right? If we always bring in the same mezcal every single time, it's delicious, but it does not go to this showcasing diversity point. It does not go to this education core value that we're, working on.
Oh, that's fantastic. No, my mezcal knowledge is just kind of minimal, and you've enlightened me. I had no idea that some of these native agaves took 20 to 25 years to come to fruition. In my head, I had it stuck at 7 years from plant to harvest.
Yeah, 7 to 8 years. That's for espadín for sure. That's enough time. You get even then it's a long time, right? Like every other spirit I can think of is grapes, corn, right? Those are all annual harvests. Like it's a crop. But even 7 to 8 years for agave, that's already a long time for that plant to mature, to be ready. But for wild agaves, oftentimes it takes longer. So for example, we have Aroqueño now that's about 25 years roughly. Tepeztate, the same thing. So yeah, that's all part of what's special about mezcal.
So continuing the education and setting up you've got your family-owned producers, you've imported it. Now, how did you set up your distribution system in the US? And is it being distributed into other countries as well?
Yeah, so we have distribution. We have distribution and sales in the U.S. in about 13 states right now, and actively working on expanding to other states so that we cover the whole country, with the idea that anyone who wants good mezcal should have access to mezcal. It's mezcal for the people, like the legal system, the bureaucracy, and should not stand in the way between end user consumers and small producers. But to answer your question, so we're just in the US for now, and also in conversation with other states in the US and in conversation with international markets.
Sure.
As far as, go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say, so what is your current education initiatives in the US to kind of bring out mezcal and help kind of popularize it and really educate consumers on it?
Sorry, the question is what we're doing for education for consumers.
Yeah, you've got your distribution set up. How are you actually spreading the word?
Several ways. We live in a digital world, increasingly digital, that is no longer an option. It's a necessity in my mind. If in terms of mezcal education as a company, if you want to maximize your impact. So we basically, our first hire as a company is a digital content and marketing manager, Aaron Newcomb, who is great. And Aaron just joined Erstwhile about a month ago. And so we are basically covering all the digital venues that we can think of, obviously starting with our website. I love researching. So I write blog posts that are interesting from my perspective as an end user consumer, things that I wish I had known as a more clueless consumer a few years ago that I know now that I want to share with others. So blog posts. It's hard when you're running a company and wearing all hats. So I don't write as much as I would like to. But for example, we have a series, a 3-part blog series that I've written on why is mezcal so damn expensive.
Why is it?
So here's the spoiler. It's not actually, right? Again, coming back to lack of education. As a consumer, if you truly understand, and not just in theory, but viscerally understand the amount of work for the physical labor, the sheer amount of time for the agave to mature, that labor in itself, the gravitas of the labor-intensive gravitas should already convince you that, no, this is not too expensive. I'm willing to pay $100 bottle for all the work that went into it. But the question, the kind of the punchline of this blog series that I wrote is actually, that's actually what everyone is talking about. And rightfully so, when they talk about the cost of mezcal, it's the labor intensiveness, but they're missing, that's not the tip of the iceberg, but that's about 25, 30% of retail price we pay as end user consumers. What people don't ever talk about in my experience, including people in industry, is the real costs add up once the mezcal arrives in the US. We're not talking about the labor intensive nature of it anymore, as inspiring as it is. It's the less inspiring, less glamorous, less, poetic steps of what happens when mezcal lands in the US. Is having to clear the three-tier legal system. It's not sexy. No one talks about it, but you have to you should understand as an end user consumer, if you want to make educated decisions and be a thoughtful consumer, for my mind. And obviously I have a legal background. So these are things I find interesting that maybe not all others do, but it's worth, putting the content out there. So anyone who has an interest reads it.
No, I think it's a phenomenal value. And anybody that's ever wrestled with a full-grown agave plant will understand the labor intensiveness. I've got a hillside on the side of my house, and there's about 10 full agaves. And just getting back there and keeping them squared away, it is tough.
Playing with them, it's physically imposing.
Yeah, I can testify to that. And then the distillation, and then the age, and then are all your mezcals aged, or none of them aged, or is it vary for the producers?
So all of them are not aged. Blanco, Joven are some words to describe it. We don't have any reposados or añejos, meaning having stayed touched the barrel, stayed inside the barrel for X amount of time. I don't have anything against aged mezcal. It's just that the kind of mezcal that we love and the producers that we represent, there's already so much flavor inherent in the mezcal from the spirit and the personality of that plant that took 10, 20 years to grow and hand of the maker. There's already so much flavor. For me as a consumer, it's like, I don't need to put it in a barrel. It almost just hides, clouds, overshadows the essence of the mezcal. So it's not, there's just this idea, this is a more mature, more flavorful mezcal because it's been aged. That might be true for, I don't know, tequila or whatever, vodka, certain kind of spirit, but not for the kind of traditional mezcal.
Kind of takes out that wild farm nature of it. Yeah, I would 100% agree. Maybe a little 1 year, but nothing more, because it really detracts from it. So what is your favorite way of, aside from straight, drinking mezcal? How would you recommend?
How do I recommend drinking mezcal?
Yes.
Kiss it, don't shoot it. I'm not a rules person. I don't believe in telling people what to do. I think that's arrogant. I think everyone has the right to enjoy mezcal however they want to enjoy mezcal. For my personal, if I may make suggestions, one is to don't shoot it. Certainly not for Erstwhile Mezcal. It makes me cringe when people do it, and I politely suggest that they could slow down and savor the mezcal. And depends. I mean, some people, I always drink it at room temperature, but I don't fault anyone or think less of them if they want to have it on the rocks. It could just be too intense, and for their palate, it's better on the rocks. So why not go for it? In Oaxaca, the traditional accompaniments, it's common to find slices of orange and sal de gusano. It's salt, seasoned salt laced with gusano, the worm.
Oh, yes.
Agaves. But, that's just Oaxaca. In other regions, there's different traditions, different accompaniments. In Durango, which I haven't been to in person, my understanding is that it's more common to serve it with cheese.
Oh, that would be good. For sure. What about in cocktails? I see you got some cocktails on the Erstwhile site.
Yes, we love, my co-founder and we're both cocktail enthusiasts. Mm-hmm. So before we knew anything about mezcal, we loved cocktails. So we brought that to Erstwhile with us. The recipes on Erstwhile's website are just some of our all-time favorite mezcal recipes. It's been tested and ourselves in person, not just some random recipe we found. It's like, yeah, this is good. If you make it in these proportions, it's a good cocktail. So everything is we're very hands-on people. But that's just a limited collection. I would say general themes for pairings when it comes to cocktails. Mezcal pairs really beautifully with citrus. It has to be the key being fresh citrus. So fresh grapefruit, fresh orange, fresh lemons, fresh limes, all great. Pineapple is a great combination. So our signature cocktail, the Erstwhile cocktail right now is called the Velociraptor, that involves Erstwhile Espadín, mezcal, and fresh pineapple juice. What else does it go well? Ginger.
Oh, that would be good.
But it's very versatile. Mezcal is super versatile in cocktail. Pretty much you can take any standard, classic, good cocktail and sub out the liquor, be it whiskey, rye, rum, gin, just substitute it with mezcal. Chances are it's a more interesting cocktail.
Yeah, no, I would agree, especially like some of the kind of the smokier scotches.
Absolutely.
Mezcal would just slip right in perfectly there.
Absolutely.
So as we kind of wrap down, who would you like to give a shout out to? I always like to, express gratitude and really help provide a venue for people to give a shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. There are many people that I'm grateful to in this industry. So one would be Mezcalistas. That's the co-founder, Susan Koss, Max are friends of mine, and they're really just like-minded. A lot of they're writers, journalists. They do a lot of great informative articles on the mezcal industry. They're also connectors. So Mezcalistas organizes Mexico in a Bottle. It's the largest mezcal tasting extravaganza I dare say North America, because definitely in the US, but in North America, because I haven't attended an event like this in Oaxaca or Mexico of that caliber. So, I'm super excited that in-person Mexico and Bottle events are back finally after the pandemic. As we emerge from the pandemic, it's coming up in October in San Diego and November in San Francisco this year, 2021. And I hope to see you and as many of your listeners and followers.
I'm located in San Diego. I think I've got a date on the calendar now.
I'll see you, Drew, in October. Come as my guest.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. So, Yuan, where can people learn more about you and Erstwhile? Erstwhilemezcal.com is a good resource. Yeah. And there's, about us page and press media mention for people who are interested. Our business model and mezcal have been featured in Forbes Wine Enthusiast, Radio Heritage Network. So you don't take our word for it, see what other people are saying about Erstwhile. And we have an online shop too. So anyone who wants Erstwhile delivered straight to their door can do so on erstwhilemezcal.com as well, /shop, I believe. And we have e-commerce coverage for 42 out of 50 states in the US right now. So not the entire country, but not bad given our restrictive legal system that we have. No, that's fantastic. Even in wine, I think there's still 4 states you can't directly ship to. Yeah. That's pretty good. That's very good. So Yuan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Drew. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. I'm going to see you in October.
Okay, see you in October. I'll follow up.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.